Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining me for another restful episode of true, scary stories to help you fall asleep. Today, we're going to be reading true middle of nowhere horror stories. I hope you enjoy them. So, without further ado, lay back, relax, and enjoy these true, scary stories. A few years back, I was driving home after a shift. It was 3 or 4 a.m., and I was tired but not exhausted. It's a deserted state route in the middle of nowhere, and it's pretty common not to see a single car during the 30-mile trip. I drive this road multiple times a week. It's mostly open fields and some farmland through this 30-mile stretch. This particular night it was cold, but the sky was clear, like no clouds or anything. And I actually love nights like this, because you can see the stars so well without light pollution. Anyway, about halfway back home, I come over this hill to a 2 or 3 mile straight stretch. A huge dark object about the length of a pickup truck, but far rounder and thicker catches my attention, as it's just hovering about 50 feet in the air, 50 or 60 feet off the road over a farm field. There's a very bright light coming down from the side or bottom. I couldn't tell exactly where it originated from because it was so bright. As I was going about 50 miles per hour past it, I only had a few seconds to look at it, but the image is burned into my mind. I have no idea what it was. I wanted to turn around, but I was kind of freaked out. I'm sure that alien life exists somewhere, but as for visiting our planet, I don't know. But if I ever had to paint a picture of what I think a UFO could look like, I'd paint whatever the heck that I saw that night. Unfortunately, I haven't seen anything odd over that area since that night. Years ago, my dad took my mom, my sister, and myself to one of his interstate routes and made it a camping trip where we would set up a tent each night. One night, we stopped in the middle of nowhere and set up. During the middle of the night, my mom really needed to pee, but was worried as she could hear strange noises. She woke us all up, and all we could hear was what sounded like heaps of people walking around us. This was super freaky as we were hours from a big town. Dad ended up grabbing a cricket bat and a torch, freaking out that stuff was about to go down. He opened up the tent flap ready to defend us, and we were surrounded by cows. There were hundreds of them. Apparently, the area that we were in was known for faceless grazing, where the cows could go where they please. Mom just hung on for the night. This was in Australia, by the way. And from memory, it was in the Northern Territory. My dad was a long-haul trucker years back. He would drive from Ontario all over the United States. The one creepy encounter that I remember him mentioning was as he was passing through Florida. Of course. He was driving through the Everglades late into the night, out in the middle of nowhere. No civilization for miles either way, when he notices a white figure come into the headlights or on the shoulder of the road. He slows down, and there is a man completely naked coming out of the swamp. My father slows and stops in the road, thinking that this guy may need help, as this man starts crossing over the road. He stops dead in front of the truck and stares at my dad, at which point my dad realizes that this naked man is holding a shotgun. He stands there for a few seconds staring, holding this gun, and then continues across and disappears back into the wilderness whence he came. It left so many questions, unanswered. Not a truck driver, but my dad always tells me the story of when he was backpacking alone with his dog in the Pacific Crest Trail in Northern California in the late 70s. My dad had parked his car on the side of a highway, and he and his dog were about 7 miles down the trail. It was getting to be late in the afternoon, so he was hoping to find a place to spend the night. Suddenly, his dog starts to make a low growl, and the hair on the back of her neck stands up. My dad was thinking there was possibly a bear or something nearby, as his dog was a very experienced backpack dog and was not easily rattled by things. He looks around and doesn't see anything. He notices that Mika is basically pointing out a spot on the trail with her nose a little bit ahead of them. He decides to walk up and see what she's looking at. And there, he finds a massive footprint. To hear him describe it, this footprint was larger than any human can make, extremely deep, and had claw punctures. He said he stood and stared at it in disbelief for at least 5 minutes because he didn't understand how this could possibly have been on the trail. He thought that perhaps it was a hoax or folks messing around, but he hadn't seen a soul and he was in the middle of nowhere. Who would come out to the middle of the trail where there were hardly any hikers and make a hoax footprint of some sort? And why would the dog be upset? He said he couldn't explain it, but he basically had this feeling of terror and turned around on the trail right then. He didn't know if it was his mind playing tricks on him, but he swore he heard sounds in the trees nearby that sounded like a large animal as he booked it out. His dog remained completely alarmed the whole hike back, whimpering and pacing, which was out of character. He said he basically ran 7 miles back down the trail as fast as he could with his pack on and tore out of there in his car. To this day, he still claims that it was one of the freakiest things that he's ever experienced. I was making a delivery out in the middle of somewhere in the Midwest, literally rolling fields as far as you could see. After I made my delivery, I didn't have any time to get anywhere else, and it was getting late, so I just parked on their property and took my 10. It was kind of creepy because there were no lights, but I was tired, so I closed my curtains, locked my doors, and laid down to sleep. About 3 hours from my break being over, it sounded like what I could only describe as about 5 to 10 people pushing on either side of my truck, making it rock back and forth, and what sounded like hands frantically beating on the sides of my truck. I didn't sleep anymore during that break, and it's the only time I ever logged a pre-trip inspection that was less than 3 seconds. As soon as I could get my duty status changed, I went on the drive line and hauled butt out of there. My door stayed locked until it was daylight, and I could get to a truck stop that had a decent amount of people at it. Never found out what it was either. I never found any handprints or any evidence of tampering on my truck. Okay, so I was at one point a truck driver, but this didn't happen to me or to someone driving a truck. But it did happen at night on the road. So my friend was in a car with his 3 friends, driving out Long Island somewhere. They had been out at a bar or something until it closed and were heading home. The driver notices that they're being followed by another car. Everyone's like, "Nah, you're crazy." He pulls off at the next exit. The car follows. He proceeds right back onto the highway, and the other car still follows. Okay, now everyone is losing their minds. It's not a cop car. and it looks like there are 4 guys in that car too. For whatever reason, my friends have one of those 30,000 candle power flashlights, so they decide to light these guys up. They aim out the back window and switch it on. In the car behind them are 4 dudes with Jason Voorhees hockey masks on. My friends scream, and the now blinded hockey mask dudes scream and pull over. My friends got away. I work in northern Nevada nightly, running between Reno and Salt Lake City, pulling triples. I only work nights, so I'm used to working at night and don't really ever get sleepy. So I'm positive that this wasn't a hallucination. Well, I had to take my break, so I pulled onto an on-ramp at around 3 a.m. near Halleck, Nevada, and started surfing the internet. I distinctly remember it being a moonless night, which meant that it was about as dark as it gets in the middle of absolutely nowhere. Out of the corner of my eye, I catch something moving in my mirror at the very back of my third trailer, more than 100 feet away. There are tons of perpendicularly opposed lights on our trailer, so whatever is moving is only illuminated for a split second at a time. When I get the chance to focus on it, I realize that someone is sprinting up my set towards the cab, with something in each hand. Luckily, I was idling on a steep incline, and clutched in and stuck it in fourth and gunned it. In hindsight, I'm glad I wasn't as heavy as I usually am, and could really get up to speed quickly. I only take my breaks now in well-populated areas. I was driving on a cross-country road trip through the middle of nowhere, Kansas, when I had one of my tires blow out. I pulled over and went to call AAA, but I had no service on my phone, so I got out and started the process of trying to change the tire myself. After a very short while, a cop pulled up and asked if I needed help. I said, "Yes, thank you, officer," and he said, "'Cause you're in luck. I just so happen to know the best tow truck driver. He could take you into town, and you could get all fixed up. No problem." The mosquitoes were eating me alive, and frankly, I only had a donut-style replacement tire and no clue how to properly change it. So I said, "Yes, please," and the officer gave the tow truck a call. After another short while, the tow truck arrived and the officer left. The driver asked, "Where am I towing you to?" So I was like, "I'm not sure, to town, I guess. Somewhere where I can get my tire fixed." He said, "Well, you're in luck, because I know the guy at the only place that's open right now who can fix that for you." I said, "Okay, sounds good," and he towed us to the auto repair place. This was basically a ghost town, if you could even call it a town. The tow truck driver and the repair guy sat around and talked for a couple of hours while my tire was being fixed. Bear in mind, there was nobody else there but me and my passengers. There was nobody else anywhere within sight. The town was empty except for the gas station connected to the repair place. Finally, they came out and said I was all set and gave me both my bills, one for the repair and one for the tow, $1,200 in total, for one tire and a 5-mile tow, for a 1991 Grand Am that wasn't even worth that much. I was furious but had no options. So I gave him my credit card and he was like, "Sorry, guy. We're a cash-only kind of town, hey." I was like, "Okay then, well I don't have any cash on me, so how are we going to settle this up then?" And he was like, "Well, you're in luck, because there's an ATM next door at the gas station my buddy owns." So I went to the gas station and took out the maximum I could on 3 on 4 different cards, each with a $20 withdrawal fee. I looked behind the counter, and in addition to the gas station attendant, there stood the cop, the tow truck driver, and the repair guy, all munching on Doritos and having a good laugh. I'm pretty sure I got hosed, and potentially maybe even sabotaged. Looking back, that cop sure arrived really quickly, and my other 3 tires were all still relatively new. I had to cut my trip short and invest in cortisone cream for the million mosquito bites. My grandpa was in the Teamsters Union for over 30 years. Teamsters is a driving and trucking labor union based on the East Coast in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Delaware. He was a great trucker. In fact, he only had one minor incident in his 30-plus years of trucking. He was coming back from a long haul and was on Highway 55 in New Jersey, which is known as the most dangerous highway in New Jersey. Another thing most locals know about 55 is that a large amount of Native American artifacts were dug up and found during the highway's construction and repairs. Now back to the story. Gramps was 30 minutes from home, and it was dark out. He was later in his trucking career, and had already had 20 years or so under his belt. And again, not a single accident. Out of nowhere, anywhere from 3 to 5 human silhouettes dart out from the left side of the highway to the right. Grandpa was understandably startled, and swerved his rig to the left, whereas the figures had made it to the right already. He scraped the cab and trailer against the guardrail, and braked as hard as he could. His eyes darted to the rearview mirror to see the last of the figures duck into the tree line. He waited there for 10 minutes, just replaying what just happened in his head, even though the whole ordeal was over in 5 seconds. He never got a good look at the group for obvious reasons, but he said that they ran with what looked like canes in their hands and were wearing rags. He's from Philly, and moved to southern Jersey after he married my grandma. So yeah, he is a Philly city homeboy big time. Of course, he knows Native existed, but never of the kind on the East. Just the ones that hunt buffalo in the Clint Eastwood movies. It's pretty obvious that the canes were either spears or bows, and the rags the figures wore were animal hides or crude cloth. When he returned home, he was still shaken, and never talked with his wife, my grandma, at first. He only opened up about this with his trucking buddies, until one of them recommended that he should indeed tell his wife about the situation. So yeah, that's the story. I tagged along with my grandpa in his truck, since I was able to go to the bathroom on my own say about the age of 5. When school started, I left with him every break we had. Been most over all of Europe before I turned 12. Once in Austria in the summer, we were driving on a smaller highway, and Grandpa really needed to use the bathroom in the middle of nowhere. So we pulled over on the shoulder, and he grabbed some paper and his flashlight, and went around the front of the truck to the ditch. I rolled down my window as I waited in the cabin. After around 1 minute, I hear my grandpa shouting in despair, "Open the door, boy." I see him running along the positioning lights, alongside the trailer towards my door, pants along his knees. I popped the door wide open, and he flew up the steps into the back seat, screaming words that I've never heard before. And he taught me a lot of bad words along them roads. He slams the door and said, "Look outside," as I heard crazy commotion outside. He shined the ground outside, and there outside were 2 absolutely mental wild boars, headbutting and fighting the lower parts of our truck. My grandpa caught his breath and explains, as he pulled his pants down, a car passed and he saw a body with a leather suit and MC helmet laying in a ditch some 5 meters away. He shined his light and it seemed to be moving. A split second later, a boar looked out from inside the leather jacket covered in blood and mess. The second one must have been close by. Experienced as he was, he just ran for the truck without even pulling his pants up. We notified the local authorities and then drove off the first truck stop way down that road. Grandpa's need for going to the restroom didn't seem that important anymore. We were scared, but boy, did we tell that story to everyone that we ever met on the road. This one happened when I was hauling freight from New York to Nevada. I worked for a company that has many acronyms, and all of them bad. The company was pretty good, but never home. I always passed this ghost town on the border of New Mexico and Texas. Every time I passed through it, I got chills. I swore to never stop in that town because the closest town was a good 50 miles away, if not more. Unfortunately, I was unlucky, as my hours for that day had me stuck right in the center of that town. I pulled into the 70s era gas station and walked around. I thank God that I had my mag light, on steroids flashlight, as it made everything bright as day. I didn't find anything but boarded up windows and a swinging door to a hole in the ground toilet. I finished up my business, and thank God that I didn't need to sit down. I did my walk around and checked everything we were supposed to. A truck in tip-top shape is a truck. You never will be stranded in the middle of nowhere. I did this 3 times as my standard custom because I was a nervous Nelly. I got into my truck and checked everything inside and made sure no hitchhikers came. Then closed all of my curtains to wind down after locked everything. I wasn't moving, and my freight wasn't going to be disturbed out here. After getting about 3 hours of sleep, I woke up to knocking. I was slow to it until I heard bam, 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 bam on my driver's side door. I rushed to the driver's side and turned my flashlight down. No one was there and no footsteps. I thought that was odd and opened the door. Looked around all over the place and saw nothing. Got out, grabbed my keys and locked the door. Walked around the entire rig and noticed I only saw my shoe prints. I checked on everything and nothing was wrong. I did one more pass before I heard a bam, bam, bam on the passenger side this time. I ran over there quickly to see nothing there. I sighed to myself and prayed as I did another pass around the rig. Maybe someone was pulling a prank and being a jerk. I didn't see anyone at all and started to panic a little. If they climbed on my rig, I was going to be angry. I climbed into the truck after unlocking it. I said a prayer and went to bed. The next morning I did my morning pass and noticed what looked to be animal tracks. I shrugged it off as another animal being idiots. I said a prayer of thanks after I finished checking and swore to end my day early if I'm not halfway through my hours for that day, if I pass through that town again. I don't do trucking anymore after several problems, and now work as a caregiver for my grandfather. Many years ago, I was driving south on a freeway in the middle of Utah. I haven't seen another car coming or going for miles, even though it's the middle of the day. Then I see a semi ahead in the right lane of this 2-lane southbound freeway. I'm gaining on him in my lovely red sports car, so I pull into the left lane to pass. I was slightly over the speed limit to pass him quickly. He was doing slightly under the speed limit. There is no shoulder because it's some kind of bridge or culvert crossing. Remember, no other cars anywhere around. Just as I reach the halfway point on the semi, he starts changing lanes for no reason, into my lane. I have nowhere to go because there is no shoulder, and I'm going to die. Time slowed. The world blurred. Somehow I floored it in time, and my wonderful car flung me forward and ahead of death. He was fully in my lane when I looked in the rearview mirror. I have no doubt that he tried to kill me. It was clear, sunny, and he had nothing in front of him that would cause him to change lanes. There were no curves to hide my very red car as I overtook him. He could easily see me coming on the long straightaway. There was absolutely no reason for him to change lanes right as I was passing him. This part of the freeway was always isolated back in the day. There were no cars near us, no animals, and I saw no car for the next few miles as I raced away from him. If he tapped my car or if I overreacted, it probably would have looked like an unfortunate accident. I was a bus driver, and I did what they call the first sign on shifts, which are the first buses out of the depot. I usually started around 3:30 to 4 a.m., and one day I was running late for work, and I was naughty and didn't do my pre-departure check, and took off out of the depot. I was about halfway to the starting point of my route, in a bus that is pitch black with interior lights off, when I hear a voice right behind me say, "Where are we?" I absolutely crapped myself. Look up, and here is this homeless guy standing right behind me in the bus. I said, "What the heck are you doing on the bus?" And it turns out he slept in it overnight, and because I didn't do my pre-departure check, I didn't notice him. Guess who never missed doing a pre-departure check ever again? My dad isn't a trucker, but he used to take me with him to go to various cities and provinces to deliver some packages. I remember this creepy night since it happened when I was a teenager. We were driving across a highway at nighttime, maybe around 9 p.m. We were talking, laughing, and I was joking with him. And all of a sudden, he slammed on his brakes, and I almost hit the windscreen. I was like, "Dad, what's wrong?" Turn around. His face was so pale, and he said, "I hit a girl. Did you see that? I hit her." And he was about to open the door and walk to the front of the car to check it out. But I told him that I didn't see any girl, and he stopped opening the door. He tried to look outside, but everything was dark, and all I could see was the empty road. There was no blood, no dead body, nothing. The beam range from the car was bright enough to see 45 meters ahead. When he calmed down, he didn't say a thing and kept driving. I didn't say a single word as well because the atmosphere was really weird and creepy. When we reached the destination, my dad asked me again, "You didn't see that girl? The girl with long black hair and dressed in white?" At this time, I look at my dad, didn't say a word and shake my head. My dad never mentioned that story anymore, not to anyone in the family. And for some reason, I didn't tell that story to my siblings as well. I don't think I've shared this story before. At the time, I was working IT for a 3-letter formerly great tech company, doing retail point-of-sale upgrades. One of the techs that had been on an overnight job had gotten suddenly sick, and they needed an extra hand in the middle of the night. And I like money, so I went out there in the middle of the night to a site maybe 70 miles away. It was 1 to 2 a.m., and I'm going down roads that I wasn't familiar with. Right before I go around a bend, on an empty 2-lane highway with, of course, no streetlights, and road cones are sort of haphazardly set up to start to block off the left lane. I'm in the right, so I don't mind, but it was weird that there were no warning signs or nothing. And then, what seemed like a quarter of a mile down the road, there's a car just stopped in the right lane that I was in. I slow down, and nearly at a stop because I'm a dumb teenager who didn't realize what this was. And out of the car step 2 dudes and start walking towards my truck. Well, I start to nope right out of there and run over a cone to get away. One dude tried to jump in front of me, but I got around him and sped off down the road. The traffic cones had stopped right where the stopped car was. I'm already a very anxious person, so after the panic and adrenaline wore off a few miles down the road, I called the cops to report what happened. Headlights appeared on the horizon behind me, which caused me to panic even more. I told the 911 dispatcher that I thought that I was being followed, and I pulled off at the next exit because it had a gas station. I pulled off, and the car behind me did too. My heart was slamming in my chest as I pulled up at the pump and sprinted into the store, only to find that the car that had pulled in behind me was a completely different car than the one that was stopped in the road, and had a small woman driving it, who had gotten out to pump her gas, instead of the two dudes who had jumped out of their car. After I had collected myself and told the dispatcher that it was someone else, I went out to ask her if she had seen the car stopped on the road after the cones. The lady pumping her gas said that she had seen the cones, but there was no car stopped on the road when she passed by. 15 minutes later, a cop came by the gas station to take my statement about it, and said that they had gotten a similar report a couple of weeks prior, but that was about it. Never heard back about if the cops found anything or not. Years ago, I was driving with my ex-girlfriend back from a wedding in northern Wisconsin, heading towards Madison where she lived. We were probably like 20 or 30 miles away from the city at that point, and it was probably around 1 a.m. My GPS, which was some really cheap brand that my dad got me as a gift from Radio Shack, had been going through some backcountry highways for some reason, after I had stopped for gas instead of getting me back on the expressway right away. I didn't mind. I kind of always found those really peaceful, even though at night they're pretty creepy. My girlfriend was asleep in the passenger seat, so I had turned down the music really quiet to not wake her, which added a bit of the eeriness of it all. I'm like really into this groove of driving, focused on the roads because it was so dark without streetlights everywhere. Then something on the side of the road catches my eye. It was a giant mountain lion, with what appeared to be blood all over its face. I start shaking my girlfriend awake to get her to see it before it was gone, but she woke up too late. I pulled over to the side of the road and asked her to watch the rear view so that she could see this huge thing cross the road, but it never did. She was convinced that I imagined it all because that area of Wisconsin is not known for mountain lions. But I swear I saw it. So, I am an over-the-road truck driver in America. I generally stay in the Midwest as I enjoy the open road and less traveled areas. I tend to drive at night because the roads are a lot more empty and there tends to be less traffic construction going on around that time. Around this particular night, I was in Kansas, making my way to Wyoming. I drive for hours at a time nonstop, so before my drive, I stack up on food and drinks. I've accustomed my bladder to hold going to the bathroom after years of truck driving until I can't hold it anymore. Now in Nebraska, I get the urge to pee, so I start finding a part of the road that I'm able to pull over safely without damaging my tires. But this is the backwoods of the country, so finding this would be a little hard but not impossible. When I finally feel that I have found a perfect enough location, I pull over. Since I'm in the middle of nowhere, I have nowhere to pee, besides an empty gallon that contained water, because there's no way I'm stepping outside in the dead of night. As I'm doing my business, I hear a tap. I do want to make it known that I travel in my truck alone. I don't have a partner on the truck, nor a pet of any kind. The truck radio is off, the windows are up, and all you can hear from my perspective is the hum of the truck running. I begin to look for the sound, which at first I thought was my mini fridge, because when it gets unplugged, the melted water from the freezer will leak out and start to make a patter noise on the floor. I checked and it wasn't that, and in realizing this, I noticed the tap sounded more like a small rock hitting the side of the truck. the driver's side in particular. Within my truck, I start to look outside of the driver window, but don't find anything in particular, so I start to look out of all the windows. I don't see anything anywhere, so I start to think it could be the truck itself. I get back in the driver's seat to get out of the truck to look under the hood. As I'm about to step out, another small rock hits my door, and I look out into the side of the road where in the field stand these tall corn stalks. Keep in mind, these corn stalks are tall. I mean, I'm standing on the top step of my truck and I can see right above them. And in looking out into the darkness, I see the top of someone's head. Just the top, not even a forehead, just their hair, which was black. The average height of a corn stalk is 8 foot. So, I don't know about you, but whoever that was had an advantage. I get back in the truck and lock the doors, put the window down a tad bit, and yell, "Hey, you need help?" No answer. "Hey man, you good?" No answer. So I say screw it, put the truck in gear, and get out of there as quick as I could. I don't even look back, just try to get away from them and the area as fast as the truck will go, after being at a standstill on the side of the road. I drive for hours until I reach Wyoming and pull over at a truck stop to get some sleep. Before heading to sleep, I go inside the truck stop to get some food, and as I'm coming back to my truck, I see marks on the back of the passenger side of the truck, as if someone had keyed my truck. I start angrily looking around to see who it could have been, but can't really come to a conclusion, since most of the other drivers weren't in their front seat. Then, I start looking around my entire cab and notice the marks are also on the back of the cab, near the platform where the cab and trailer connect. I start remembering about the person I saw in the field and thought it was them, but I don't remember feeling anyone hop on back there. So I was left puzzled. Nothing else happened for the rest of the day, thankfully, so I'm not sure who that person was, or what they wanted or what their intentions even were. And I'm glad that I never ended up finding out. This happened on a road trip with my ex-girlfriend, and I've always wanted to tell this story. We were headed to Eureka, California from Oregon, and had to go on this highway 299. We had a late start to our day, so it was nighttime by the time we set out on 299, thinking it would be just a normal stretch of rainy highway. We were thoroughly unprepared for how twisty and isolated it really was. Midnight came, and it had been pouring rain. My girlfriend was dodging rockfall for the entire drive so far. She was absolutely drained. We found a flat place to pull over for a quick nap, like a little outcrop of dirt alongside the road. The rain had stopped, but it was muddy, and man was it quiet. Eerily so. We were both so drained that we just crashed for about 30 minutes or so in our respective seats. Keep in mind, we'd been on the road for a while and hadn't passed a single car the entire time. I woke up to the sound of scratching underneath the car that I brushed off as an animal. Then I heard steady plopping out in the mud, like someone was circling our car, but I didn't see a thing. I elbowed my girlfriend thinking she was still asleep, but she was fully awake and frozen in place and just said, "I know." She said she had this feeling that something was off from the second that we pulled into that spot. We held deathly still for a bit longer, still reckoning that it was a deer or something, in denial. I got a large wave of goosebumps when we heard that faint scratching start up yet again. This time we bolted into action, and she threw the car into reverse pretty quickly. Suddenly she screamed, "There's someone there, oh my God," as she saw a figure dive into a nearby bush, lit up from the reverse lights. I looked but didn't see anything. We both were in 100% panic mode and practically skidded back onto the road. The rest of the drive back into California was unremarkable, but we did have a motorcycle tail us for most of the way back after that. From a decent distance, luckily. But seeing that faint light bobbing far behind us gave us the creeps on top of everything. It's probably unrelated, but who knows? Everything felt creepy and wrong for the rest of the night. Be careful on Highway 299 in Oregon. This happened some 15 years ago, as I was driving back up north from Newbury in the UK. Now, I don't do anywhere near as much driving as you Americans, but for late night trips, I always operate a buddy system just in case. My friend had taken his rest and woke up about 45 minutes before time to set off. I checked the weather forecast. Heavy fog due across the M1 at around 2 a.m., just as I would be hitting that part of the route. Dang. I asked my buddy if we can set off a half an hour earlier to skip it. He agrees and we set off. We're doing good time thanks to the lack of traffic, but I can see a fog line appearing. It gets thick fast. I take a look at the clock. 1:30 a.m. Dang, weather forecasters got it wrong again, I think to myself. I ask my buddy to stay alert in case I miss something, as I'll be concentrating dead ahead. I have to slow to about 35 to 40 miles per hour from 70 because visibility is basically nil, but stopping the car would be suicide if there's anything behind me. Based on my position, I know there's a service station at about 15 miles, so I'll turn off there and wait it out. The fog starts getting really thick, to the point where I'm thinking maybe it's actually safer to stop. I can't see the road or the cat's eyes at this point. I pull to the left slowly and wait for the telltale feel of the hard shoulders rumble strip. It didn't come, nor has the car hit a ditch. At this point, I'm a bit freaked out, as I have no orientation and I can't see the road. I'm down to about 15 miles per hour now as my buddy says, "Hey, there's a light in front of us." It's a green light, which is odd for the motorway, but maybe I can see what's going on from there. I pick up a little speed and head towards the green light. As I'm driving forward, the fog begins to lift, and I realize where we are. At the intersection of Beverly Road and the A63, the green light was a traffic light. I pull the car over and we both say to each other, "What the heck?" This is approximately 150 miles from where the fog started, a good 2.5 hour drive away. I look at my watch, 1:50 a.m. I take a look at the radio clock in the car, 4 a.m. I get my phone out. My buddy gets his phone out. Both say 1:50 a.m. As I look in the rear view, there's not a trace of fog behind me. Both of us are quite freaked out at this point, so we decide to find out which clock is right. I drive to the station, 4:07 a.m. To this day, I have no explanation, and neither of us can account for the missing 2.5 hours. Not how I managed to do multiple lane changes and junctions to get from the M1 to the M62, and then the A63. My friend and I were driving south towards Gallup, New Mexico in his elderly mother's Prius, bringing it back to Southern California for her from Colorado. It was the middle of nowhere, on a dark road about 2:30 in the morning, when this 1990s safari van starts getting right on our tail. We move over to let the van pass, and he gets right behind us and starts flashing his lights. My buddy gets into the other lane again and slows down enough that I can see the license plate has a piece of cardboard taped over it. The van then starts swerving to try and force us off the road. My buddy floors it, but it's a Prius. We pull ahead for a second, but the van rapidly catches up and starts trying to force us off the road at speed. As we approached an off-ramp, I decided that I had enough of this stuff to pull out my 1911. I rolled down the window and leaned out, presenting my weapon, and prepared to send rounds into this van. The van slammed on the brakes and shot off the off-ramp. We continued in a gallop and phoned the police, who told us that they were probably trying to get us to stop and rob us. They did not expect any problems from a Prius with California plates. This was the scariest situation I have run into while driving, for sure. My friends and I were taking a road trip from Arizona to California. We decided we wanted to go before the sunrise, and we left at about midnight. We were about 3 hours in, but my car needed gas and the girls and I wanted to stop to toke up. We had a considerable amount of weed in the car, and we wanted to get rid of it all before our drive back. So we decided to roll a joint in this poorly lit gas station. We were just about to take a hit when this guy comes running up to my car and starts to pound on the driver's side window. I rolled it down just enough to talk to him, but not enough for him to force entry into my car. He seemed scared and shaken up, but something didn't seem right. He was sweaty, and I could tell that he was looking inside of my car for something. At first, I thought he was an undercover cop, and my heart was racing. However, he said he had some car trouble and asked if we would take a look at it. At this point, it was 3 a.m. I had all my doors locked and had not gotten gas yet. I knew nothing of cars, and neither did any of the ladies in the car. We told him this. I told him I could call a tow for him, although he persisted on using my phone. The other girls were freaking out, and of course I was too. I could see a payphone by the vending machine at the gas station, and told him that I would slip him a few quarters through the crack in my window so that he could call whoever he would like. Out of nowhere, his tone changed. He got really calm and looked me dead in the eye. He told me to unlock the door. My eyes darted towards the direction of his car, and we could see 2 other males pacing while one male was sitting in the driver's seat. I noped right out of there, told him to leave us alone, rolled up the window and hopped right back on the highway. I know for a fact if we had gotten out of the car, we would have never been seen again. I called the police to report him and asked to be notified if there was an arrest made. I never heard back. Arizona is #1 for sex trafficking. Be safe out there, ladies and gentlemen. When I lived in rural Maine, my boyfriend at the time took me on a drive in his truck. He wanted to show me something he said he learned about from one of his college professors. We already kind of lived in the middle of nowhere, but we drove even further into literally nowhere. We were on this road that was 5 to 8 miles of just forest on both sides. No houses, no signs, no driveways, nothing. Then he pulls over near a slight break in the trees. Was a very overgrown old driveway, chained off at the road, with an old, dilapidated sign that said private property. We parked on the road and walked in about a half mile, and there was this old, abandoned log cabin house there. I don't know when it was built, but it was old enough to not have any connection to the electric grid and no electrical outlets inside. It was a bit odd, but my boyfriend said he had been there before and led me to a door in the back where we could break in. He mentioned that the last property owner said in their will that no changes could be made to the property after they died, like no agriculture or major renovations. So I guess that's why the land was never resold, since nobody could do anything with it. I don't remember if we entered through the second floor somehow, or climbed upstairs once inside, but I remember being on this loft that overlooked the interior of the house, with no railing. Definitely a 15+ foot drop right at the edge of the loft. Maybe there weren't stairs inside at all, or a ladder. It was back in the fall of 2011 when I was a freshman in college, so it's a bit fuzzy. I remember seeing an old wood stove made of iron downstairs and a countertop, but otherwise I think the place was pretty sparse and made entirely of wood. There was also no sink in the kitchen area and no bathroom, so no plumbing either. The loft we were on had literally thousands of dead flies all over the floor. It was creepy and gross. I know they could have gotten stuck there over the years, but the sheer number of them on every surface and not being decayed, turned to dust, was just so unnerving. My boyfriend, for some reason, decides this is a nice place to smoke weed. I didn't want to stay, but he laid a blanket out over the flies, and he sat and rolled a joint. I did take a couple of puffs, but started getting an uneasy feeling, so I stopped. I'm a regular smoker, but this was just a crazy situation. Then suddenly I realized that the sun was setting, and we were losing light fast. The house very quickly got this terrifying impending doom feeling, and I knew that I just needed to get out of that house. I expressed my concerns to my boyfriend multiple times, each time seeming more desperate to leave, but he wasn't worried and took his sweet time hand-rolling himself a cigarette and taking all of the unnecessary stuff out of his pockets, laying them out in the blanket and slowly putting them away. It was really making me mad that he wasn't taking me seriously, and I had such a sense of urgency to get out. I ended up getting out of the house first and started running down that half-mile long dirt driveway to get out and away. My boyfriend shuffled behind me, fumbling with things in his hands. He was practically a prepper and carried all sorts of things with him in all his pockets, cargo pants, backpack, etc., at all times, like flashlights, lighters, weed pipes, rolling papers, weed, rolling tobacco, and probably 20 other things he thought were useful. I got out of the woods when we were just losing that last light before the true darkness set in. Mind you, this country road has no streetlights the whole way. He had flashlights, but I didn't feel like flashlights equaled safety. I felt we were being watched, and whatever it was super negative. I don't know if I overacted, or my boyfriend was literally just doped up and clueless, but I never really trusted him after that. I don't know why the heck I let myself get in that situation. Needless to say, he's not in my life anymore. I live in southern Missouri, middle of nowhere. Few neighbors that live several hundred yards away, and are pretty old and nobody is usually out. It's winter, so they are never outside, and it gets dark around 6 p.m. It was 8 p.m. and I was in my shop working, when I heard a whistle in the tune of a song sounding like it was just outside of my shop. Nobody had been around, or I would have known. It went on for about a minute, and I got chills down my spine, and a sudden fear rushed over me. So I ran inside to get my wife to come out with me, in case it happened again, but it never did, wondering if anyone else has had any similar experiences with this, or know what it could have been. My friends and I are on our way from Chicago back to our home in Evansville, Indiana. As much as we drive through the Midwestern country to get there, pitch black highways surrounded by trees and cornfields. About 4 hours away from home, my friend screams and I look up. We hit a deer going 50. The poor guy bounces off the front end and is probably dead on impact. We come to a stop to commiserate, call our parents, etc. We are stranded on a highway in the middle of nowhere, trees to our right and a few houses a bit far off to our left, all surrounded by cornfields, of course. My friend is standing outside surveying the damage when we hear a scream, a man's scream, a bit far off to our left. My other friend and I look at each other wide-eyed. A few minutes pass and we hear one again. I make a joke about skinwalkers and my friend gets back in the car. A bit later, after calling 911, we hear another scream, a woman this time, and it seems closer. We are waiting on the deputy and nervously joking about whether it's skinwalkers or crazy elderly people with sundowners, a la The Visit. And my friend facing the trees suddenly laughs nervously and rolls up the window. I just heard clicking noises outside of my window, and I'm rolling it up because I'm not going to pretend that I didn't just hear them. Anyway, now we're back on our way. The car is drivable. And out of skinwalker country or whatever the heck that was. Just something spooky that happened, and I thought that I'd share it. Thank you so much for listening to all of the stories in this video. I hope you enjoyed them. I also hope that you enjoy the extra rain at the end. Get a good night's sleep, everyone, and I'll read to you in the next video. Bye-bye now.